The distant wail of a train whistle cut through the late afternoon air as Isaiah Jones rode into Castle Dome, Arizona territory. The year was 1879, and the setting sun cast long shadows across the dusty Main Street, painting the modest buildings in hues of amber and gold. Isaiah's weathered face told the story of his 32 years, most spent under the relentless western sun. His daughter, 6-year-old Emma, sat nestled in front of him on his chestnut mare, her small fingers clutching the saddle horn with familiar ease. "Are we home now, Papa?" Emma asked, tipping her head back to look up at him, her honey-brown curls falling from beneath her small bonnet. "Yes, little one," Isaiah replied, his deep voice softened for her. "This is Castle Dome, this is where we start again." The mining settlement of Castle Dome, nestled in the shadow of the mountain bearing the same name, had seen better days. The silver mines that had once brought prosperity were yielding less, but there was still enough activity to sustain the town. For Isaiah, it represented something he'd been searching for since his wife Sarah had passed away 2 years ago, a chance to put down roots somewhere far from the memories that haunted him in Texas. He guided his horse toward the modest hotel at the end of the street. The journey from El Paso had been long, and Emma needed a proper bed tonight. Tomorrow would be time enough to search for the small ranch he'd arranged to purchase through correspondence with a lawyer in Yuma. As they dismounted in front of the Western Star Hotel, Isaiah noticed Emma's small shoulders slump with exhaustion. He hoisted her into his arms, her head immediately finding its familiar spot on his shoulder. "I'm hungry, Papa," she murmured against his neck. "I know, sweetheart." "We'll get some hot food inside." The hotel's interior was simple but clean, with a small lobby that opened into a dining area. A few patrons sat at tables, eating their evening meals while a woman stood behind the front desk, her back to them as she organized keys on a wall rack. "Excuse me, madam," Isaiah called out, shifting Emma's weight in his arms. "We need a room for the night." The woman turned, and Isaiah felt something unexpected, a slight catch in his breath. She wasn't conventionally beautiful, perhaps, but there was something about her face that commanded attention. Her eyes were a clear, intelligent green, set in a heart-shaped face framed by rich auburn hair neatly pinned up. She wore a practical dark blue dress with a white collar, modest and unadorned but well fitted to her slender form. "Of course, sir," she replied, her voice carrying a hint of Eastern refinement that seemed out of place in the frontier town. "Just you and your daughter." Before Isaiah could answer, Emma, who had perked up considerably at the sound of the woman's voice, wiggled to be put down. Once her feet touched the floor, she stepped forward, her exhaustion seemingly forgotten as she gazed up at the woman with undisguised curiosity. "My name is Emma," she announced. "We rode for days and days to get here. Do you have pie?" The woman's lips curved into a warm smile. "Well, Miss Emma, it just so happens that I baked an apple pie this morning. Would you like a slice after your supper?" Emma nodded enthusiastically, then did something that took both adults by surprise. She reached out and tugged gently at the woman's dress, her eyes wide and earnest as she declared, "You look like the mama I asked God for." A charged silence fell over the lobby. Isaiah felt heat rise to his face, mortified by his daughter's boldness. The woman's cheeks flushed pink, but her expression remained gentle as she knelt to Emma's level. "That's a very sweet thing to say," she responded softly. "My name is Rebecca Clark. I help run this hotel." Isaiah cleared his throat. "I apologize, Miss Clark. My daughter sometimes speaks without thinking." Rebecca stood, smoothing her skirt. "No apology needed, Mr. Jones. Isaiah Jones. Mr. Jones. Children speak honestly, and that's a rare gift in this world." She picked up a room key from behind the desk. "Room 3 is available. It's one of our larger rooms with 2 beds. Will that suit?" "Perfectly, thank you." As Rebecca led them upstairs, Isaiah noticed the graceful way she moved, the confident set of her shoulders. There was no wedding ring on her finger, he observed, then immediately chastised himself for noticing such a detail. "Supper is served until 8. Rebecca explained as she opened the door to a clean, modest room. The washroom is at the end of the hall and fresh water is in the pitcher. Is there anything else you need? This is fine, thank you, Isaiah said, setting their bags down. Emma tugged at Rebecca's dress again. Will you eat with us? Papa doesn't talk much at supper. Emma, Isaiah admonished gently, Miss Clark has work to do. Rebecca's eyes met his, and for a moment, something passed between them, a mutual recognition, perhaps, of the challenges of dealing with a determined child. Actually, Rebecca said, I was about to take my own supper break. I wouldn't mind some company if that's acceptable to your father. Isaiah found himself nodding before he'd fully considered his response. We'd be honored. After settling into their room and washing away the dust of travel, Isaiah and Emma made their way downstairs. Rebecca waited at a corner table, 3 places set. Emma rushed toward her, climbed onto the chair beside her, and immediately began telling her about their horse, their journey, and the jackrabbit they'd seen that morning. Isaiah watched in amazement. Emma, normally shy around strangers, had taken to Rebecca with unprecedented enthusiasm. As he took his seat, he found himself studying the woman across the table. In the warm lamplight, he noticed faint freckles dusting her nose and a small scar near her right eyebrow that somehow added character to her face. I hope you don't mind, Rebecca said, nodding toward a platter of fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and greens that a young server was placing on their table. I took the liberty of ordering for all of us. The chicken is the best thing on the menu. It looks wonderful, Isaiah replied, suddenly aware of his own hunger. As they ate, Rebecca gently prompted Emma with questions about her interests, displaying a natural ease with children that Isaiah found himself admiring. When the conversation turned to him, he explained his plans briefly. I've purchased the old Harker place about 3 miles outside of town, he said. I'm hoping to raise horses. I worked on a horse ranch in Texas for many years. The Harker Ranch, Rebecca nodded. It's been empty for about a year now. Old Mr. Harker passed on and his son had no interest in ranching. It's good land, though has a year-round spring on the property. Isaiah raised an eyebrow, impressed by her knowledge. You seem to know the area well. I've been in Castle Dome for 3 years, she explained. When you run a hotel in a small town, you tend to hear about everything. She paused, then added more quietly, I came west after the war. There wasn't much left for me back east. The subtle shift in her tone suggested there was more to that story, but Isaiah didn't press. Everyone in the West carried their past like private luggage, some burdens heavier than others. And now you're a hotel proprietor, he observed. Rebecca smiled, a hint of pride in her expression. Co-proprietor, I own half the business with Mrs. Thornton, who's visiting her sister in Tucson this month. We've worked hard to make it respectable and comfortable. Their conversation flowed more easily than Isaiah had expected. Rebecca was intelligent and well-spoken, with occasional flashes of dry humor that caught him by surprise. By the time apple pie was served with an extra dollop of cream for Emma, who was clearly Rebecca's new devoted admirer, Isaiah found himself reluctant for the evening to end. As Emma's eyes began to droop despite her best efforts to stay awake, Isaiah knew it was time to retire. We should get this young lady to bed, he said, standing and reaching for his wallet. Rebecca shook her head. The meal is included with your room. I can't accept that, he began, but she cut him off with a gentle firmness. Consider it a welcome to Castle Dome. Her eyes softened as she looked at Emma, who was fighting to keep her eyes open. Besides, it's not every day I'm mistaken for an answer to prayer. There was something in her voice, a wistfulness, perhaps, that made Isaiah wonder about her own story. But before he could respond, Emma had slid from her chair and taken Rebecca's hand. Will I see you tomorrow? She asked, yawning halfway through the question. Rebecca squeezed the small hand in hers. I'll be right here at breakfast, Miss Emma. As Isaiah carried his drowsy daughter upstairs, he found himself looking forward to morning in a way he hadn't experienced in a very long time. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the Arizona sky a vast expanse of perfect blue. Isaiah woke early, as was his habit, but found Emma already up and dressed, sitting by the window watching the street below come to life. "Papa, can we go see our new house today?" she asked without turning from her vigil. "Yes, after breakfast," he promised, wondering at her eagerness. Emma had been reluctant to leave their previous home, clinging to the familiar even as Isaiah had explained they needed a fresh start. When they went downstairs, Rebecca was indeed at her post, checking in a travel-worn mining engineer. Her face brightened when she saw them, and Emma rushed forward with a cheerful greeting that made several other breakfast patrons smile into their coffee cups. "Good morning to you too, Miss Emma," Rebecca replied, her eyes lifting to meet Isaiah's. "And Mr. Jones, did you sleep well?" "Better than we have in weeks," Isaiah admitted. "Trail sleeping doesn't suit either of us anymore." After a hearty breakfast during which Emma managed to secure a promise from Rebecca to visit their new ranch someday soon, Isaiah settled their bill and prepared to leave. He found himself lingering at the desk, searching for words to extend their acquaintance beyond this brief encounter. "Miss Clark," he finally said, "I wonder if you might recommend a place where we could purchase supplies for the ranch. We'll need quite a bit to get started." "Phelps General Store has the best prices," she replied efficiently. "And if you need furniture, Walker's Carpentry down the side street does good work." She hesitated, then added, "If you'd like, I could make a list of what you might need. Starting fresh in a new place can be overwhelming." "That would be most helpful," Isaiah said, grateful for both the practical assistance and the excuse it provided for further contact. Rebecca quickly jotted down some notes on hotel stationery and handed it to him. Their fingers brushed briefly during the exchange, and Isaiah was surprised by the small jolt of awareness that passed through him. It had been a long time since he'd noticed such things. "Thank you for your kindness, Miss Clark." "Rebecca," she corrected him with a small smile. "Miss Clark sounds like someone's schoolmarm." "Rebecca," he repeated, liking the way her name felt, "and I'm Isaiah." "Safe travels today, Isaiah," she said, and something in the way she said his name made him want to hear it again. As they rode out of town toward their new home, Emma chatted excitedly about Rebecca, the hotel, the town, and the adventure ahead. Isaiah listened with half an ear, his thoughts circling back to the woman with the intelligent green eyes who had shown them such unexpected kindness. The Harker Ranch was modest, but sturdy, a main house with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with a good stone fireplace, a barn that could hold up to 8 horses, and a small bunkhouse for the eventual ranch hands Isaiah hoped to hire. The previous owner had left in a hurry, and some basic furniture remained. A table, chairs, a bed frame, and a few other essentials that would save them the immediate expense of furnishing the place completely. As Isaiah inspected the property, Emma explored with the boundless energy of childhood, claiming the smaller bedroom as her own and discovering a calico cat with 4 kittens nesting in the barn. "Papa, Papa, can we keep them?" she called out, her face alight with excitement. "I suppose we could use some good mousers," he agreed, knowing the battle was lost before it began. Emma had been asking for a pet for months, and the appearance of these cats seemed providential. They spent the day cleaning, organizing, and making plans. Isaiah found himself talking more than usual, describing to Emma how they would fix up the ranch, which breeds of horses they would raise, and how they would make this place their home. Beneath his practical planning ran a current of hope he hadn't felt in years. Late in the afternoon, as they were preparing to head back to town for supplies, the sound of an approaching wagon caught their attention. Isaiah stepped onto the porch, instinctively placing Emma behind him, a habit formed in less peaceful territories. To his surprise, the wagon contained Rebecca Clark, accompanied by an older man driving the team. She waved as they approached, and Emma darted past him with a squeal of delight. "Rebecca, you came to see our ranch." The wagon stopped in the yard, and the driver helped Rebecca down. She wore a simpler dress today, with a shawl against the cooling afternoon air, and her hair was braided and pinned up beneath a practical bonnet. "I hope we're not intruding," she called out, approaching the porch with a covered basket over her arm. "I thought you might appreciate a home-cooked meal for your first night in your new house. This is Mr. Simmons, our handyman from the hotel. He was kind enough to drive me." Isaiah descended the steps, genuinely pleased by her thoughtfulness, not intruding at all. "We were just about to head back to town for supplies." "Then our timing is perfect," Rebecca said. "Mr. Simmons can take you, and I'll stay here with Emma to prepare supper. That way you won't have to make the trip with a tired child." Before Isaiah could protest that she shouldn't trouble herself, Emma had grabbed Rebecca's hand and was already pulling her toward the house, excitedly explaining about the kittens in the barn and which bedroom was hers. "Are you certain?" Isaiah asked, though he could see the decision had essentially been made by his daughter's enthusiasm. Rebecca's smile was warm and reassuring. "Absolutely. Go get what you need. We'll be fine here." The trip to town with Mr. Simmons proved educational. The older man knew everyone in Castle Dome and provided a running commentary on the community, its history, and its characters. Isaiah learned that Rebecca had come to Arizona after losing her husband and brother in the war, had worked initially as a schoolteacher in Yuma, and had eventually partnered with the widowed Mrs. Thornton to purchase and renovate the hotel. "Miss Rebecca's got a good head for business," Mr. Simmons informed him as they loaded supplies into the wagon. "Turn that run-down place into something proper. Folks respect her, even the rough types. She doesn't put up with nonsense, but she's got a kind heart. Helped nurse half the town through the fever last winter." Isaiah absorbed this information, his respect for Rebecca growing. He'd known many women who'd come west to escape tragedy and build new lives, but few managed to establish themselves so successfully, especially on their own. When they returned to the ranch, the scene that greeted him stirred something deep in Isaiah's chest. Through the window, he could see Rebecca and Emma in the kitchen. Rebecca was at the stove, and Emma stood on a chair beside her, carefully stirring something in a bowl. Both were laughing, and the domesticity of the image, the warmth and simple joy it conveyed, made Isaiah pause on the porch, suddenly overwhelmed by a sense of what had been missing from their lives. He cleared his throat and entered, and Emma immediately launched into an excited description of all they had done feeding the kittens, gathering wild herbs near the spring, and preparing a special surprise dessert that she refused to name. "Rebecca says I'm a natural cook, Papa," she declared proudly. "Is that so?" Isaiah set down the packages he was carrying, his eyes meeting Rebecca's over his daughter's head. "She has a good instinct for flavors," Rebecca confirmed, her cheeks slightly flushed from the heat of the stove. "Something not everyone possesses." The evening unfolded with unexpected ease. They ate the hearty stew Rebecca had prepared, along with fresh bread she had brought from town. The surprise dessert turned out to be apple dumplings, which Emma had helped shape and sprinkle with cinnamon sugar. As they ate, conversation flowed naturally. Rebecca asked thoughtful questions about Isaiah's plans for the horse ranch, offering practical suggestions about local markets and potential buyers. She told them about Castle Dome's small but diverse community, the miners, merchants, and ranchers who made up the population, and the occasional visitors passing through on their way to California or the larger Arizona settlements. "The town's smaller than it was during the mining boom," she explained, "but it's stable now. People look out for each other here." After supper, when Emma's eyes began to droop despite her determined attempts to stay awake, Isaiah carried her to her new bedroom. The mattress they'd purchased hadn't yet been delivered, but Rebecca had cleverly arranged blankets on the floor to make a comfortable nest. Emma fell asleep almost instantly, clutching the rag doll she'd carried all the way from Texas. When Isaiah returned to the main room, he found Rebecca washing the dishes. "You don't need to do that," he protested. "I don't mind," she replied, handing him a towel. "You can dry." They worked in companionable silence for a few minutes, the mundane task somehow comfortable rather than awkward. "Thank you," Isaiah finally said, his voice low so as not to carry to Emma's room. "Not just for supper, but for being so kind to Emma. She's taken to you in a way I haven't seen since." He trailed off, the memory of his late wife suddenly sharp and painful. Rebecca set the last plate aside and dried her hands. "She's a special child, smart and observant." She hesitated, then added gently, "She told me about her mother. I'm very sorry for your loss." Isaiah nodded, not trusting himself to speak immediately. Finally, he managed, 2 years ago. "Fever took her in 3 days. Emma barely remembers her now, which breaks my heart all over again." "Children are resilient," Rebecca said, "but they carry the absence with them, even when the memories fade." Something in her tone made Isaiah suspect she spoke from personal experience. "You understand loss," he observed quietly. Rebecca's gaze shifted to the window, where the last light of day was fading to purple dusk. "My husband David died at Gettysburg, my brother Thomas at Petersburg near the end. I was 23, suddenly alone in a world that had no place for a childless widow with no family left. So you came west." "Yes, to teach initially. Then, when that position ended, I found work at the hotel. Mrs. Thornton and I eventually became partners." She turned back to him with a small smile. "The West offers second chances to those brave enough to seize them. Is that what you found here? A second chance?" "I found purpose," she replied carefully. "Independence, respect in the community, those are valuable things for a woman on her own." "But not everything," Isaiah suggested. Sensing the unspoken in her careful words, their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke. The connection between them seemed to strengthen in the silence, a recognition of shared experiences, of parallel journeys that had somehow led them to this moment, in this place. The spell was broken by Mr. Simmons calling from outside that it was time to head back to town before full dark set in. Rebecca gathered her shawl and basket, moving toward the door. "Will we see you again soon?" Isaiah asked, suddenly reluctant to have her leave. "I suspect you will," she answered with a smile. "Emma has already extracted a promise that I'll teach her to make pies next week, and Castle Dome is a small town, Mr. Jones. Our paths are bound to cross." "Isaiah," he reminded her. "Isaiah," she repeated softly. "Good night. And welcome to your new home." As he watched the wagon disappear down the road toward town, Isaiah felt a curious mixture of contentment and anticipation, as if something important had begun, though he couldn't yet name what it might be. The next week passed in a blur of activity as Isaiah and Emma settled into their new home. The furniture they'd ordered arrived, along with the supplies needed to begin work on the ranch in earnest. Isaiah hired 2 local men as ranch hands brothers named Michael and Thomas Weaver, who knew the territory well, and came highly recommended for their horse-handling skills. Emma, to Isaiah's relief, seemed to be thriving in their new environment. She had already made friends with the Weaver brothers' children and spent hours each day tending to her cats, exploring the property's boundaries, and helping Isaiah with small tasks around the ranch. On Saturday, they rode into town for supplies and to attend church the following day. Isaiah told himself his quickened pulse, as they approached the Western Star Hotel, had everything to do with Emma's excitement about her promised pie-making lesson with Rebecca, and nothing to do with his own eagerness to see the auburn-haired hotel proprietor again. Rebecca greeted them warmly when they entered the hotel lobby, though Isaiah noticed she seemed slightly paler than before, with faint shadows beneath her eyes suggesting recent sleepless nights. "Are you unwell?" he asked with concern. "Just tired," she assured him. "We had a group of surveyors stay this week. Rowdy bunch up at all hours." Emma, oblivious to adult concerns, was already tugging at Rebecca's hand. "Can we make the pies now? I told Papa all about it and he's very hungry for pie." Rebecca laughed, the sound brightening her tired features. "Well, we can't have your father going hungry, can we? Let me show you to your room, and then we'll get started in the hotel kitchen." The afternoon that followed was one Isaiah would remember for a long time. In the large, well-organized hotel kitchen, Rebecca patiently guided Emma through the process of making a proper pie crust, demonstrating the careful balance of ingredients and technique required. Isaiah, nominally there to supervise, found himself drawn into the activity, tasked with peeling and slicing the apples while the master bakers, as he called them, prepared the dough. The ease with which the three of them worked together struck him forcefully. There was a natural rhythm to their interaction, a comfortable division of labor that reminded him of happier times in his marriage, before Sarah's death had left such a gaping hole in their family life. When the pies were finally in the oven, 2 large ones for the hotel's Sunday dinner, and a small one for Emma to proudly serve her father, Rebecca wiped flour from her hands and turned to find Isaiah watching her with an expression that made her cheeks flush. "What is it?" she asked, self-consciously brushing at her flour-dusted apron. "Thank you," he said simply, for being so patient with her." Rebecca glanced at Emma, who was carefully washing the baking utensils at the sink, her small face serious with concentration. "It's my pleasure," she replied softly. "She reminds me of myself at that age, curious about everything, determined to master whatever task is before her." "Did you learn to bake from your mother?" Isaiah asked, realizing how little he knew about her early life. A shadow crossed Rebecca's face. "My mother died when I was 12, but yes, what I know of cooking and baking came from her. After she was gone, I became the woman of the house, caring for my father and brother." Her expression softened with memory. "My father used to say I made the best apple pie in Virginia, though I suspect paternal pride influenced his judgment." Isaiah wanted to ask more about her childhood, her life before the war, the experiences that had shaped her into the capable, independent woman who stood before him, but Emma called for Rebecca's attention, and the moment passed. That evening, after attending the small service at Castle Dome's modest church, Isaiah found himself accepting Rebecca's invitation to Sunday dinner at the hotel. Several other town residents were also present, and Isaiah was introduced to the local doctor, the mine supervisor, and several merchants and their families. He observed with interest how Rebecca moved among her guests, equally at ease discussing mining prospects with the men and local school matters with the women. She was clearly respected in the community, her opinions sought and valued. Yet there was a certain reserve about her too, a careful maintenance of boundaries that kept others at a polite distance. Except, it seemed, with Emma. Throughout the meal, Isaiah noticed how his daughter gravitated to Rebecca, how naturally Rebecca responded to her, including her in conversations, quietly guiding her manners when needed, sharing small whispered jokes that made Emma giggle behind her napkin. It stirred complicated feelings in him: gratitude that Emma had found such a positive female influence, wonder at the natural affinity between them, and a deeper emotion he wasn't ready to examine too closely. As the weeks passed, a pattern developed. Isaiah focused on establishing the horse ranch, purchasing several promising mares and a fine stallion from a breeder in Yuma. Emma divided her time between her lessons with Mrs. Peterson, the town's teacher who came out to the ranch twice a week, and helping around the property in the way of energetic 6-year-olds, and Rebecca became a regular visitor. Initially, the visits centered around Emma teaching her cooking skills, bringing books for her to read, helping with her lessons when Mrs. Peterson was ill. But gradually, Isaiah found himself looking forward to the quiet conversations he and Rebecca shared after Emma had gone to bed, when they would sit on the porch in the cool evening air, talking about everything and nothing. He learned about her life in Virginia before the war, her childhood on a small farm, her brief teaching career at a girls' academy, her courtship and short marriage to David Clark, a lawyer's son with political ambitions cut short by war. "We had barely a year together before he enlisted," she told Isaiah one evening in early November as they watched the stars emerge in the clear desert sky. "Sometimes I can barely remember his face now." "I understand," Isaiah replied quietly. "Sarah's features fade a little more each year, though I have a photograph to remind me." "I have nothing of David's," Rebecca admitted. "Everything was sold to pay debts after my father died. I came west with just one trunk of belongings." "Yet you've built a good life here," Isaiah observed. "You should be proud of what you've accomplished on your own." Rebecca was silent for a moment before responding. "There are different kinds of success, I suppose. I've achieved financial security, respect in the community. But sometimes I wonder." When she didn't continue, Isaiah prompted gently, "What do you wonder? If I've been too cautious, too focused on independence at the cost of?" She shook her head. "It's foolish thinking." "Not foolish at all," Isaiah said. "I understand the fear of risking your heart again. After Sarah died, I couldn't imagine ever feeling." He paused, suddenly aware of the dangerous territory their conversation was entering. Rebecca's eyes met his in the dim light from the window, and for a moment neither spoke. The air between them seemed charged with unspoken possibilities. The moment was broken by Emma's voice calling from inside, asking for a glass of water. Isaiah rose to attend to his daughter, and when he returned, Rebecca was standing, preparing to leave. "It's getting late," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Mr. Simmons will be waiting to drive me back." "Of course." Isaiah walked her to the waiting wagon, conscious of a tension that hadn't been there before. "Thank you for coming out today. Emma always looks forward to your visits." "Just Emma?" Rebecca asked, then immediately looked as if she regretted the question. Isaiah took a chance, reaching for her hand. "No," he said quietly, "not just Emma." Her fingers tightened briefly around his before she withdrew her hand and climbed into the wagon. "Good night, Isaiah." As November turned to December, the weather cooled and Castle Dome prepared for Christmas. The town organized a holiday bazaar to raise funds for the small school, and Rebecca, as one of the community's leading businesswomen, was heavily involved in the planning. On the first Saturday of December, Isaiah took Emma into town for the event, which was being held in and around the church. The normally quiet Main Street was bustling with activity. Stalls had been set up selling handcrafted goods, preserved foods, and holiday decorations. Children ran about excitedly, and the atmosphere was festive despite the simple surroundings. Isaiah immediately spotted Rebecca directing the placement of tables for the baked goods auction. She wore a forest green dress he hadn't seen before, with her hair arranged more elaborately than usual, and the sight of her made him pause mid-stride. Emma had no such hesitation. She ran straight to Rebecca, proudly carrying the small embroidered handkerchiefs she had made to sell at the bazaar. "Rebecca, look what I made. Mrs. Peterson showed me how to do the tiny stitches." Rebecca knelt to admire Emma's handiwork, praising her neat stitches and creative designs. When she looked up and saw Isaiah approaching, her smile widened in a way that made his heart beat faster. "You look very handsome today, Mr. Jones," she said, rising to her feet. "I don't believe I've seen that coat before." Isaiah, suddenly self-conscious in the new dark blue coat he'd ordered from the tailor in Yuma, nodded acknowledgement. Special occasions seemed to warrant special attire. "Indeed it does," she agreed, her eyes twinkling. "And since you're so properly dressed, perhaps you wouldn't mind being pressed into service. We're short a man for the Christmas tree raising." Isaiah found himself happily conscripted into the work of erecting and decorating the large pine tree that had been brought down from the mountains. The task brought him into the company of several of the town's leading men, including the mayor and the bank manager, who used the opportunity to discuss his plans for the horse ranch and offer connections to potential buyers. By the time the tree was decorated with paper ornaments made by the schoolchildren, strings of cranberries, and a few precious glass baubles brought west by various settlers, Isaiah felt more integrated into the Castle Dome community than he had in the 3 months since their arrival. The day continued with various activities: a children's choir performance, the baked goods auction, where Isaiah paid what he knew was an exorbitant amount for one of Rebecca's apple pies, and games for the children. Emma was in her element, having made several friends among the local children, and Isaiah was content to watch her happiness while occasionally catching glimpses of Rebecca as she moved efficiently among the various activities. As dusk approached and lanterns were lit around the bazaar area, the fiddler and a banjo player set up near the church steps, and people began clearing space for dancing. Isaiah, who had never been much of a dancer even in his younger days, was preparing to make excuses when Emma tugged insistently at his hand. "Papa, you have to dance with Rebecca." She told Mrs. Thornton that nobody has asked her yet, and she looked sad. "Emma, it's not polite to repeat private conversations," Isaiah admonished gently, though his eyes immediately sought Rebecca in the crowd. She stood near the punch table, engaged in conversation with an elderly couple, but there was indeed a certain tension in her posture that suggested discomfort. "Please, Papa? She taught me to dance last week, and she's very good at it." With a mixture of trepidation and anticipation, Isaiah made his way through the gathering crowd to Rebecca's side. She looked up as he approached, a question in her eyes. "Miss Clark," he said formally, aware of the curious glances from those nearby, "would you do me the honor of a dance?" A flash of surprise crossed her face, followed by a smile that transformed her entire countenance. "I'd be delighted, Mr. Jones." The musicians struck up a lively reel, and Isaiah led Rebecca to the makeshift dance floor. As they took their positions, he leaned closer to murmur, "I should warn you that I haven't danced in years. I may step on your toes." "I'll risk it," she replied with a confidence that put him at ease. To his surprise, once the dance began, Isaiah found that his body remembered more than he'd expected. Rebecca was an excellent partner, following his lead smoothly while subtly guiding him through the more complex turns. Their movements fell into natural harmony, and as they circled the floor, Isaiah felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in a very long time. When the music ended, there was a smattering of applause, and Isaiah became aware that several people had stopped to watch them. Rebecca's cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright with enjoyment, and on impulse, he kept hold of her hand as the next tune began a slower waltz. "One more?" he asked. She nodded, stepping closer as the dance required. The feeling of her hand in his, the light pressure of her other hand on his shoulder, created an intimacy that was both thrilling and somehow right. As they moved in the slow, circular pattern of the waltz, the rest of the crowd seemed to recede until it felt as if they were alone, suspended in a perfect moment. "You dance very well for a man who claims to be out of practice," Rebecca observed, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "I have an excellent partner," he replied, "and perhaps stronger motivation than I've had in some time." Her eyes met his, a question in their depths that Isaiah wasn't sure he was ready to answer explicitly. But as the dance continued, he found himself drawing her slightly closer, their movements becoming more attuned, more intimate, until the final notes faded and they reluctantly stepped apart. A tug at his coat brought Isaiah's attention to Emma, who stood watching them with undisguised approval. "You danced beautifully," she declared. "Just like in a fairy story. Can we take Rebecca home for supper now, Papa? I told her you said it was fine." Isaiah looked from his daughter's hopeful face to Rebecca's amused one. "Did you indeed?" He asked Emma, trying to sound stern but failing completely. "Well, she might have embellished slightly," Rebecca admitted. "She suggested I might enjoy seeing the kittens again as they've grown so much since my last visit." "A shameless ploy to secure your company," Isaiah said, smiling. "But one I fully support. Will you join us for supper, Rebecca? I can promise a simple meal but good company." "I'd love to," she accepted, her eyes holding his for a moment longer than necessary. The drive back to the ranch in Isaiah's newly purchased wagon was filled with Emma's excited chatter about the day's events, the prizes she'd won in the children's games, and her plans to use the money earned from her handkerchief sales to buy Christmas presents. Rebecca listened attentively, asking questions that delighted Emma with their seriousness, treating the child's achievements with genuine respect. Isaiah, guiding the horses through the gathering darkness, found himself stealing glances at Rebecca's profile, illuminated by the soft glow of the wagon's lantern. There was something profoundly right about her presence beside him, about the easy way she interacted with Emma, about the feeling of completeness the three of them created together. At the ranch, while Isaiah saw to the horses, Rebecca helped Emma prepare a simple supper from the provisions available. By the time he entered the house, the table was set, and the familiar domestic scene once again struck him forcefully, this time with a clarity that couldn't be ignored. He wanted this, not just for tonight, not just occasionally. He wanted Rebecca in their lives permanently. The realization should have been frightening, but instead it settled in his chest with the weight of absolute certainty. In the 3 months since they'd arrived in Castle Dome, Rebecca Clark had become essential to their happiness in a way he hadn't thought possible again after Sarah's death. Supper was a joyful affair, with Emma proudly serving the stew she had helped prepare and describing in detail all the Christmas preparations underway in town. Afterward, as promised, she gave Rebecca a full tour of the improvements to the ranch, ending with a visit to the barn to see the now half-grown kittens. When Emma finally succumbed to the day's excitement and fell asleep, Isaiah and Rebecca found themselves alone on the porch, much as they had been the night of their almost confession weeks earlier. This time, however, Isaiah didn't hesitate. He turned to face Rebecca directly, taking both her hands in his. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "When Emma said that first day that you looked like the mother she'd asked God for, I was embarrassed. But now I understand what she saw immediately, something I've come to see clearly myself." Rebecca's hands trembled slightly in his, but her gaze remained steady, encouraging him to continue. "You've brought light back into our lives, Rebecca. Not just through your kindness to Emma, though I'll be forever grateful for that, but through everything you are, your strength, your intelligence, your gentle spirit. I never expected to feel this way again after losing Sarah, but the truth is undeniable." He took a breath, then spoke the words that had been building in him for weeks. "I love you, Rebecca Clark, and if you could see your way to considering a future with me, I would count myself the most fortunate of men." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears, but her smile was radiant. "Oh, Isaiah," she whispered. "I've been so careful for so long, so determined to maintain my independence to protect myself from further loss. But Emma broke through my defenses that very first day, and you—" She squeezed his hands. "You've shown me that courage isn't just about surviving alone. Sometimes it's about risking your heart again." "Is that a yes?" Isaiah asked, hope surging within him. "It's a yes," she confirmed. "I love you, Isaiah Jones, and I love that remarkable daughter of yours. The thought of being a family with you both, it's more than I dared dream for myself." Isaiah pulled her gently into his arms, and when their lips met in a first, tender kiss, it felt like coming home after a long, difficult journey. When they finally parted, Rebecca rested her head against his shoulder, and they stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars scattered like diamond dust across the vast Arizona sky. "When?" Isaiah asked eventually, his voice hushed in the quiet night. Rebecca looked up at him questioningly. "When what? When should we marry? I'm not a patient man, Rebecca, not when I know what I want, and I want us to be a family officially, properly." She laughed softly. "So practical, no long engagement for the Jones family, I see." "Life is uncertain," he replied more seriously. "I've learned not to waste precious time. Christmas," Rebecca decided after a moment's consideration. "It would give me time to make arrangements at the hotel, and Emma would love a Christmas wedding, don't you think?" "Christmas it is," Isaiah agreed, sealing the decision with another kiss that promised many more to come. The weeks leading up to Christmas passed in a whirl of preparations. News of Isaiah and Rebecca's engagement spread quickly through Castle Dome, met with general approval and more than a few satisfied nods from those who had observed their growing attachment. Emma was ecstatic, proudly telling everyone that she was getting a new mama for Christmas, the very one I asked God for. Rebecca began the process of transitioning her hotel responsibilities, selling half her ownership share to Mrs. Thornton's nephew, who had recently arrived from the East with hospitality experience. She would retain a quarter interest in the business, providing both income and a connection to the town that had given her a second chance at life. The wedding was planned for Christmas Eve in the town's church, with a celebration afterward at the hotel. The entire community was invited, Castle Dome being small enough that exclusions would be both unnecessary and impolitic. 3 days before the wedding, Isaiah was completing work on a special project, a set of bookshelves for the main room of the ranch house, designed to hold Rebecca's extensive collection of books that had been stored in her hotel room. Emma was in town with the Weaver family, helping with final wedding preparations and, Isaiah suspected, being distracted while Rebecca and Mrs. Thornton finished work on her special dress for the ceremony. The sound of an approaching horse drew his attention. Looking out, he was surprised to see Rebecca herself riding toward the house, alone and at a pace that suggested urgency. Something in her posture, rigid, almost defensive, sent a chill through him. He met her at the door, immediately noting her pale face and the tense set of her mouth. "Rebecca." "What's happened?" She stepped inside, removing her gloves with methodical precision that seemed designed to delay whatever she had come to say. Finally, she looked up at him, her eyes troubled. "A letter came today from Virginia." Isaiah waited, a knot forming in his stomach. "Bad news." "Unexpected news." She drew a deep breath. "My cousin Elizabeth has died. Consumption. She has had a daughter, Louisa, age 5. According to the family lawyer, Elizabeth named me as Louisa's guardian in her will. The child is already on her way west with a trusted family friend. They're expected to arrive in Yuma the day after tomorrow." Isaiah absorbed this information, watching Rebecca carefully. "You never mentioned a cousin with a daughter." "Elizabeth and I weren't close," Rebecca explained, pacing now, her agitation visible. "She married a man with significant holdings in Richmond. We exchanged occasional letters over the years, but I had no idea she would name me as guardian. The lawyer indicates she had few options. Her husband died last year, and there are apparently no suitable relatives on his side." She stopped suddenly, turning to face Isaiah with an expression of anguished uncertainty. "Isaiah, I have to take her in. She's just lost her mother. She's traveling across the country to strangers. I can't turn her away, but I understand if this changes things for you. A ready-made daughter is one thing. Emma is wonderful, and we've bonded naturally. But taking on a second child, one you've never met, who will undoubtedly be grieving and difficult." She twisted her hands together. "I would understand if you wanted to reconsider." Isaiah crossed the room in 3 strides, taking her by the shoulders. "Rebecca Clark, do you really believe I would break our engagement because you've inherited the responsibility for an orphan child? What kind of man do you think I am?" The tension in her face eased slightly. "I don't." "Not really? But it's such a significant change, and with only 3 days until the wedding, the timing is actually perfect," Isaiah interrupted. "Louisa will arrive to find not just a guardian but a complete family waiting for her, a father, a mother, and a sister close to her own age." "You're certain?" Rebecca searched his face, her vulnerability clear. "Absolutely certain," he assured her, pulling her into an embrace. "This changes nothing about how I feel about you or our future together. We'll welcome Louisa into our family and give her all the love and security she needs to heal from her loss." Rebecca relaxed against him, her arms tightening around his waist. "I should have known you'd respond this way. I was just so shocked by the news and worried about disrupting our plans, and concerned about how Emma might react to suddenly having to share her new mother." "Emma has the biggest heart of any child I've ever known," Isaiah said confidently. She'll be thrilled at the idea of a sister. In fact, I suspect she'll appoint herself Louisa's personal guide to ranch life, much as she did with those kittens. Rebecca laughed, the sound slightly watery through unshed tears. You're probably right, she does have a nurturing spirit. Like someone else I know, Isaiah said softly, pressing a kiss to her forehead. They decided to tell Emma together when she returned from town. As expected, after the initial surprise, she embraced the idea with enthusiasm, immediately making plans for how she would help her new sister adjust to life on the ranch. She can share my room, Emma declared. And I'll show her how to feed the kittens, and where the best wildflowers grow in spring, and how to make apple pie just like Rebecca taught me. The wedding took place as planned on Christmas Eve, though with an added announcement about the imminent arrival of a new family member. The church was decorated with pine boughs, red ribbons, and candles that cast a warm glow over the proceedings. Emma, resplendent in a new blue dress with a matching ribbon in her hair, proudly served as Rebecca's attendant, carrying a small bouquet of winter flowers gathered from the ladies' windowsill gardens around town. Rebecca herself wore a gown of deep ivory silk, simple but elegant, with a lace collar and cuffs that had once belonged to her mother. When she walked down the church's center aisle toward Isaiah, a collective murmur of appreciation rose from the gathered townspeople. Isaiah, waiting at the altar in his best suit with a new watch chain, a gift from the Weaver brothers gleaming against the dark fabric, felt a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly overwhelmed him. Rebecca's eyes met his, steady and full of promise, and he knew with absolute certainty that this new beginning was right for all of them. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, the traditional vows spoken with deep sincerity by both bride and groom. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Isaiah's kiss was both tender and possessive, claiming Rebecca as his partner in all things to come. The celebration at the hotel afterward was joyous and extended well into the evening. The townspeople of Castle Dome, many of whom had witnessed both Isaiah's and Rebecca's individual journeys, celebrated their union with genuine happiness, offering gifts, advice, and good wishes in equal measure. Emma, despite her excitement, eventually succumbed to fatigue, falling asleep in a corner of the hotel parlor where the children had gathered. Isaiah carried her to the wagon for the trip home, her small face peaceful in sleep, unaware of the momentous changes taking place in her young life. The ranch house had been prepared for their first night as a family, fresh linens on the beds, a special breakfast laid out for morning, and a small Christmas tree in the corner of the main room, decorated with paper ornaments and candles to be lit the following day. Isaiah carried Emma to her bed, removing only her shoes before covering her with a quilt. Rebecca stood in the doorway watching, her expression soft with affection. She didn't even stir, she whispered as Isaiah joined her. She's had quite a day, he replied, gently closing Emma's door. We all have. They moved to the main room where a fire burned low in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Rebecca stood looking at their Christmas tree, her hands clasped before her. Mrs. Jones, Isaiah said, coming to stand behind her, his arms encircling her waist. How do you find your new home? She leaned back against him, her head resting on his shoulder. Perfect, she said simply, though soon to be livelier with another child. Are you worried about Louisa's arrival? He asked, sensing a lingering concern beneath her contentment. Rebecca turned in his arms to face him. A little, she admitted. She's lost so much and we're all strangers to her. It won't be easy for her at first. But she'll have what she needs, most people who are committed to loving her and helping her heal, Isaiah assured her. Just as you did for Emma, just as you did for me. Rebecca's smile was luminous in the firelight. You make it sound so simple. Not simple, he corrected, but straightforward. We build this family day by day with patience and love and forgiveness when needed. And we remember how fortunate we are to have found each other against all odds. Against all odds, she repeated, rising on tiptoe to kiss him with newfound confidence. "I like those odds, Mr. Jones. I like them very much." The journey to Yuma to meet Louisa and her escort was made by Isaiah and Rebecca alone, leaving Emma in the capable care of Mrs. Weaver. They took the stagecoach, a faster if less comfortable mode of transportation than their wagon would have been, arriving the evening before Louisa was expected. Rebecca was uncharacteristically quiet during the trip, her mind clearly occupied with thoughts of the child who was about to enter their lives. Isaiah gave her the space she needed, offering silent support through his presence and occasional reassuring touches. They secured rooms at Yuma's largest hotel and learned that the train from the east was expected around noon the following day. After a simple dinner, they retired early, both aware of the significant day that lay ahead. The train arrived precisely on schedule, belching smoke and steam as it pulled into the Yuma station. Rebecca gripped Isaiah's hand tightly as passengers began to disembark. According to the lawyer's letter, Louisa was traveling with a Mrs. Eleanor Winters, the widow of a business associate of Louisa's late father. It didn't take long to spot them, a dignified older woman in traveling clothes, holding the hand of a small, solemn-faced girl with dark curls and a pale complexion that spoke of recent illness or grief, possibly both. The child clutched a cloth doll in her free hand, her large brown eyes taking in the unfamiliar surroundings with visible apprehension. "Mrs. Winters." Rebecca stepped forward, her voice steadier than Isaiah had expected given her evident nervousness. "I'm Rebecca Clark Jones now. This is my husband, Isaiah Jones. Thank you so much for bringing Louisa safely to us." The older woman's face softened with evident relief. "Mrs. Jones, thank goodness. The journey has been exhausting and I was beginning to worry about the effect on Louisa's health." "She's been very brave, but it's been difficult." While the women exchanged information about the journey, Isaiah knelt to Louisa's level, careful to maintain a non-threatening distance. The child regarded him warily, shrinking closer to Mrs. Winters. "Hello, Louisa," he said gently. "I'm Isaiah. I know this is all very strange and probably scary, but we're very happy you've come to live with us." The little girl said nothing, but her grip on her doll loosened slightly. "Is that your doll?" Isaiah continued, keeping his tone conversational. "She's lovely. My daughter Emma has a doll too, though hers is a bit older and has lost some of her hair. Emma is very excited to meet you. She's been preparing your room and talking about all the things she wants to show you." At the mention of another child, Louisa's expression showed the first hint of interest. "How old is she?" she asked in a voice barely above a whisper. "6, Isaiah replied. "Just a little older than you. She loves stories and cats. We have 6 of them at our ranch and baking pies with Rebecca." Louisa looked up at Rebecca, who had finished her conversation with Mrs. Winters and now joined Isaiah at the child's level. "Hello, Louisa," Rebecca said softly. "I'm your cousin Rebecca. Your mother and I were friends when we were girls, though I haven't seen her in many years. She must have loved you very much to make sure you'd be taken care of." The child's lower lip trembled slightly. "Mama said she was going to heaven to be with Papa, and that I was going to live with her cousin in the West where it never snows." "Well, it almost never snows in Castle Dome," Rebecca confirmed. "It's very different from Virginia." "Would you like to see where you'll be living? We have horses and cats and a big sky full of stars at night." Louisa considered this for a moment, then nodded cautiously. "Can Mrs. Winters come too?" the older woman intervened gently. "No, dear, I must return on tomorrow's train. My grandson is expecting his first child and I'm needed in St. Louis. But you'll write to me and tell me all about your new home, won't you?" The process of transferring Louisa's care was handled with sensitivity by all the adults involved. Mrs. Winters had brought a small trunk containing Louisa's clothes and a few precious mementos from her former life, including a daguerreotype of her parents that Isaiah immediately promised would be displayed prominently in her new room. They spent the night in Yuma, giving Louisa time to become somewhat accustomed to her new guardians before the journey to Castle Dome. The child was quiet but observant, watching Rebecca and Isaiah with solemn eyes that missed nothing. By the time they boarded the stagecoach the following morning, she had begun to respond to Rebecca's gentle questions with more than monosyllables, though she remained reserved. The arrival at the ranch was a moment of high emotion. Emma, who had been watching the road anxiously all afternoon, ran to meet the wagon as it approached, barely able to contain her excitement. Louisa, overwhelmed by the open space, the unfamiliar buildings, and the exuberant greeting, pressed closer to Rebecca on the wagon seat. "Emma," Isaiah called out as he reined in the horses, "remember what we discussed. Louisa has had a long journey and everything is new to her." Emma immediately moderated her approach, slowing to a walk as she reached the wagon. "Hello," she said with careful politeness. "I'm Emma. I'm very happy you've come to live with us. Would you like to see your bed? I put my second-best quilt on it because it's the prettiest one with flowers, and I thought you might like flowers." Louisa, clearly uncertain how to respond to this friendly overture, looked to Rebecca for guidance. "That was very thoughtful of you, Emma," Rebecca said, helping Louisa down from the wagon. "Perhaps you could show Louisa the house while your father and I bring in her trunk." The two girls walked toward the house, Emma chattering enthusiastically about the kittens and the view from their bedroom window, while Louisa followed silently, still clutching her doll. Isaiah and Rebecca exchanged concerned glances. "She'll need time," Rebecca said quietly. "Everything familiar is gone, but children are resilient, and Emma's kindness will help more than anything we could do." Her prediction proved accurate, though the adjustment period was not without challenges. Louisa suffered from nightmares during her first weeks at the ranch, waking in tears and calling for her mother. She was hesitant to join in family activities, preferring to observe from a distance. And she formed an almost immediate attachment to Rebecca, following her anxiously whenever possible, as if afraid her new guardian might disappear like her mother had. But gradually, small changes appeared. Emma's persistent, gentle inclusion of Louisa in her play began to draw the younger girl out of her shell. She developed a fondness for one of the cats, the smallest of the litter, whom she named Buttercup for its yellowish coat. And most significantly, she began to smile occasionally, usually at something Emma said or did. By spring, the transformation was remarkable. Louisa's pale cheeks had gained healthy color from hours spent outdoors in the Arizona sunshine. She had developed an interest in the horses, showing a natural affinity that delighted Isaiah. And she had begun to call Rebecca Aunt Becca, not yet Mama, but a significant step toward accepting her place in the family. Emma, for her part, had embraced her role as big sister with unexpected maturity, tempering her natural exuberance when Louisa was overwhelmed, sharing her toys and books generously, and fiercely defending her new sister against a boy in town who had thoughtlessly commented on Louisa's status as an orphan. One evening in April, as Isaiah sat on the porch watching the girls chase fireflies in the gathering dusk, Rebecca joined him, a contented smile on her face. "They're doing well together," she observed, sitting beside him and linking her arm through his. "They are," Isaiah agreed. "Emma has been a blessing for Louisa. And Louisa has taught Emma patience and consideration I wasn't sure she was capable of at her age." "Children rise to meet our expectations," Rebecca said, watching as Emma demonstrated to Louisa how to cup her hands just so to catch a firefly without harming it. "And they heal best through love and routine." Isaiah squeezed her hand. "You've given them both in abundance." "I've watched you these past months, Rebecca, how you've balanced the needs of a grieving child with those of an energetic one who still requires her own reassurances. You've created a home where both girls can thrive." Rebecca's smile held a hint of sadness. "I wish Elizabeth could see Louisa now. She was so frail when she arrived, so withdrawn. Now look at her." As if aware she was being discussed, Louisa turned toward the porch, her face alight with excitement. "Aunt Becca, Papa, look, I caught one." She ran toward them, carefully cradling her cupped hands in which a firefly's glow pulsed rhythmically. Isaiah's heart swelled at the child's use of papa, a term she had only recently begun to employ, and still somewhat tentatively. "Well done, Louisa. That's a fine one." Rebecca leaned forward to admire the insect. "He's beautiful. What will you name him before you let him go?" Louisa considered seriously. "Starlight," she decided, "because he looks like a little falling star." "A perfect name," Rebecca approved. "Shall we watch him fly back to his family?" The little girl nodded and carefully opened her hands. The firefly lingered for a moment on her palm, its glow brightening, then took flight, rising into the darkening sky to join its fellows in their silent, luminous dance. Louisa watched it go, her expression wistful but not sad. "Do you think my mama can see the fireflies from heaven?" she asked suddenly. Rebecca drew the child into her lap. "I'm certain she can, and I think she's very happy to see you catching them and giving them such lovely names." Louisa leaned against Rebecca's shoulder, her small face thoughtful. "I'm glad I came to live here," she said after a moment, "even though I still miss Mama and Papa." "You'll always miss them," Rebecca said honestly, stroking the dark curls that had grown longer since Louisa's arrival. "But it's possible to miss someone and still be happy in your new life. The heart is very good at holding both sadness and joy." Emma, who had joined them on the porch steps, nodded sagely. "Like me with my first mama, I don't remember her very well anymore, but Papa says she loved me very much, and now I have a new mama who loves me too." She looked up at Isaiah. "Right, Papa?" "Absolutely right," Isaiah confirmed, his throat tight with emotion at his daughter's simple wisdom. The family sat together as darkness fell completely, watching the fireflies display and the first stars appearing overhead. Isaiah, his arm around Rebecca's shoulders and Emma leaning against his knee, felt a profound gratitude for the journey that had brought them all together, a journey of loss and hope, endings and beginnings, that had culminated in this moment of quiet perfection. 1 year after their wedding, on a crisp December day with the scent of pine in the air and the promise of a gentle winter ahead, Isaiah Jones stood on the porch of his ranch house, watching his family decorate the Christmas tree they had brought down from the hills that morning. Rebecca, her hair caught up in a practical braid, was supervising the placement of candles on the higher branches, while Emma and Louisa carefully hung the ornaments they had made together under Mrs. Peterson's guidance. The girls' laughter filled the room, punctuated by the occasional meow from Buttercup, who batted hopefully at the dangling decorations. The past year had brought changes and growth to all of them. The horse ranch was thriving, with Isaiah's carefully bred stock gaining a reputation for quality that brought buyers from as far away as California. Rebecca had established a small library in town, using her portion of the hotel's profits to purchase books, and serving as librarian 2 afternoons a week, a role that allowed her to maintain her independence while contributing to the community she loved. Emma and Louisa, now 7 and 6, had become inseparable, attending school together in town and sharing interests and secrets as true sisters despite their different beginnings. Louisa's transition from calling Rebecca Aunt Becca to Mama had happened gradually over the summer, marked by no special event but accepted by all as a natural evolution of their relationship. And there was one more change on the horizon, one that Rebecca had confirmed just the previous week. In approximately 6 months, their family would grow again with the arrival of a new baby, a prospect that had filled Isaiah with a mixture of joy and tender protectiveness toward his wife. As he watched through the window, Rebecca paused in her decorating to rest a hand briefly on her still flat stomach, a small smile playing on her lips. The gesture, so unconscious and intimate, filled Isaiah with a rush of love so intense it almost hurt. He thought back to that first day in Castle Dome, to Emma's innocent declaration that had set everything in motion. "You look like the mama I asked God for." His daughter's simple observation had proven more prophetic than anyone could have guessed. Rebecca had indeed become the mother Emma needed, and along the way, She had become everything Isaiah hadn't known. He was missing partner, lover, friend, the center of a home that had grown to include not just one child but two, with another on the way. The door opened, and Emma's face appeared. "Papa, come inside. We're almost finished, and Mama says we can light the candles when you come in." "I'll be right there," he promised, taking one last moment to appreciate the scene before him, his family, his home, the life they had built together out of separate broken pieces. As he stepped inside to join them, Rebecca looked up, her eyes meeting his across the room with a warmth that still took his breath away. "There you are," she said, reaching out a hand to him. "We've been waiting for you." Isaiah crossed to her side, taking her offered hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "I'm here now," he said, the simple words carrying the weight of a promise renewed each day. "Right where I belong." And as the family gathered to light the first candle on their Christmas tree, Isaiah Jones knew with absolute certainty that the greatest gift he had ever received wasn't wrapped in paper or tied with ribbon, but stood beside him in this room, the family that had found each other against all odds, brought together by a child's prayer, and the courage to begin again in the wild and beautiful territory they now called home.